the Code Arbiter for Woolworths. I've been appointed by Woolworths, and my role is to hear and deal with any complaints that suppliers to Woolworths bring about the conduct of anyone at Woolworths in relation to their supply of produce or food and groceries to Woolworths. So in considering complaints, I can look at whether or not Woolworths has acted in good faith towards the supplier, whether they've been fair to the supplier in relation to any conduct that's covered by the code. So it covers things like the way in which Woolworths might deal with requests for price increases, or things like the funding arrangements for promotions, or whether Woolworths has acted capriciously in relation to the position a product has in store. Those sorts of things, anything to do with the arrangements whereby you supply goods to Woolworths, I can look at and consider whether it's unfair. If a formal complaint is brought to me, I am required to investigate it, and if I think it's been unfair, I can order some appropriate compensation, up to $5 million if I think that the supplier is entitled to that sort of compensation, or I can make any other determination or order that I think Woolworths should comply with in order to address the unfairness. From the discussions I've had with suppliers, I think the biggest obstacle is that suppliers are fearful that if they raise an issue with me, and I then of course have to speak to Woolworths to get their side of the story, then they will suffer retribution or some other adverse consequences because they've raised it. So the fear of retribution or retaliation is the biggest obstacle. To address that, we've expanded my role to be a more informal role where I can have confidential discussions with suppliers. They can raise concerns and grievances with me on a confidential basis. And if I get enough information about a particular issue or practice that is being shared by other suppliers, I can then raise it with Woolworths as a systemic issue or a generic issue without disclosing the particular supplier. And I can go to them and say, look, the way in which you've been negotiating cost price increases, I think is a problem for suppliers, and have a conversation with them about their process or about systemic practices, and ask them to, consider those or change them. And in some instances that has been the case. Woolworths has changed some of its practices when I've raised with them what I think are issues with the way in which they're dealing with a particular issue. A good example is the way in which cost price increases that a lot of suppliers have made in the context of the pandemic, where everybody's costs went up significantly. When they sought to pass those increases on, Woolworths then wanted to have a conversation around, overall margin, and they're making sure that they retain their sort of profit margin. And that seemed to me to be unfair, to be raising those issues in the context of a cost price increase. And Woolworths agreed and has made sure that their buyers understand that that's not appropriate to mix the two issues and to raise performance of a product in the same conversation as they're considering a cost price increase, if that performance issue hasn't previously been raised with the supplier. So there's issues, things like that, which I've been able to raise without identifying the particular supplier that's raised it with me. Look, I'd like suppliers to be aware that there's an avenue available to them. So I'm trying to get out and publicise the fact that there's a Code Arbiter for Woolworths, and that they can raise issues, to encourage people to at least raise the issues with me informally and confidentially. Because if it resonates with another issue that a supplier's raised with me, then I've got two suppliers who've raised the issue, and I can then build up a story that I can go to Woolworths and say, I think you have a systemic issue, or I'm hearing from a number of suppliers about a particular practice. And if, for example, I hear from a number of suppliers who are all in the same category about the conduct, say, of a particular buyer, I can say to Woolworths, look, I think you need to look at buyers in this particular area, because I'm hearing feedback from suppliers without identifying them, that they're not being dealt with appropriately, things like that. So I would encourage suppliers to reach out and come and talk to me informally, confidentially, if they've got an issue or a grievance or a concern about anything to do with their dealings with Woolworths.